Dr. Griffin, can we get you to do our prayer? And then I'll do the scripture and we'll turn it over to Brother Lanham.
Yes, sir. Not a problem. Oh, 1 minute. You see, I'm just mulling, getting myself together.
I hear you.
All right, let us pray. Oh God, our helping age is past, our hope for years and years to come, our shelter from this stormy blast and our eternal home. God, we thank you for another day. We thank you because if it had not been for you on our side, certainly we would not be here this morning. We ask for your continued mercy. We ask that you would allow us to continue to grow and develop as the disciples of Jesus that you're calling men to be in 2025. We ask, oh God, that we might receive the wisdom that Brother Lanham has prepared and that we might engage with each other, that we might know that iron sharpens iron. And so, God, we bless you and we praise you now. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, so our scripture this morning is Ecclesiastic 4, 9 through 12. And it reads, two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them fall down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of three strands is not quickly broken. And that's Ecclesiastic 4, verse 9 through 12. This morning, we're gonna be blessed by Brother Lanham, who is no stranger to us here on our ministry to man. He's been there from when we started through the Kingdom Man series and has presented to us before. And we know he's gonna do a good job. So I'm gonna get out of his way and we're gonna turn it over to Brother Lanham. Thank you, brother.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone who's on board with us now, for those who's trying to get on in a minute. Bring you greetings from Magnolia CME in the community of Brooklyn in Glenn County, Georgia. There's a few ground rules before we get started. I think y'all know how I am. I'm not in love with the sound of my voice, but I'm in love with interaction and people talking. So the PowerPoint is basically a groundwork for where we will work from. I want discussion. I want us talking. I want us to interact. The phrase iron sharpens iron doesn't mean one iron beating the other. That means iron rubbing against each other. So this morning, we're going to take our time and we're going to rub against each other and talk about relationships and relational maturity and how that affects us as men, as adults, as women, how it affects us as we go through life. So we're going to start off with just starting off where we are with the first video, relational maturity. The role of a man in a relationship can vary widely, depending on cultural norms, personal beliefs, individual dynamic between partners, and life experience. Trauma, however, some common roles and responsibility often associate with men in relationships. Common roles and our responsibility, earthly and spiritual. They're emotional support, communication, partnership, respect and equality, affection and intimacy, responsibility and support. We need relationships And because that's how God made us, it's not good for a man to be alone. That's part of the verse 18 from Genesis chapter 2. That's just part of the verse. But when we talk about emotional support, we're talking about the support that allows us to have someone be there when things are not going quite right, someone to prop us up when our minds are taking us places that we don't want to go, um, that support us when we're wrong, that communicate with us, that talk to us, that would listen to us. And I think the biggest part of that is the listening part. Um, Someone told me once that prayer works because God don't say anything all the time. He just listens to what you have to say. And he doesn't judge it when you tell him. He just kind of takes it in and we go from there. Partnership. Everyone needs a helpmate. As the verses in the class said, Ecclesiastes that he just read said, that two working together is better than one. That when two lay down together, they can be warm on a chilly night. That if you're by yourself, it's just you. And there's no heat coming into you, there's just heat coming out of you. So we need a partnership as we go through this. Respect and equality. No relationship is totally 50-50. We know that. But respect comes when a person can have an opinion, can talk to you about something, and you don't just throw them aside, that you give them a voice in everything that's going on and what we're doing. Affection and intimacy. Intimacy is not always physical intimacy. It's the intimacy of thought. It's the intimacy of reflection. It's the intimacy of having someone know what's going on inside of you. And affection, showing someone that you care about them, that you care what's happening to them, that you care what's going on with them. Responsibility. Oh, that's a big one because in a relationship, everyone should carry responsibility of what goes on in a relationship. It's not all on one person. It's not all on one group. It's all on the collective. All of us together are working to try to get to somewhere, then support. So those are the overarching things that we're going to talk about today. That's the big picture. The big picture is how can we develop relationships that offer emotional support, where there's communication, how there's a partnership, how we respect each other and we have equality, how that we can be intimate and show affection and be responsible for what's going on. So that's the overarching theme for today. And we always need an overarching theme where things come from and where things go. You may see me look away from time to time. While I'm looking away, I'm actually taking notes. I have a pad here and a pen, and I write things down that when y'all say something, that if it resonates with me, I'm gonna write it down because I want to revisit and I want to talk about it. I hope everyone is taking a moment to think about what resonates with them, where we're going, where's the discussion, and how can we talk. So please, anytime that you have a thought, unmute yourself, let it out. We want to hear. Remember, iron sharpens iron by there being some friction. There has to be something going on. There has to be a back and forth. A piece of iron laying on the ground doesn't sharpen. It just get rusty. So let's make sure we sharpen our tools today. We're going to interact, we're going to talk, and we're going to move forward. First part, where and from whom do most men learn about relationships? Or most people, it doesn't have to be men. But where do we learn about relationships and how has those interactions with other people formed how we are in the relationships? So I listed 6: home, school, the streets, our parents, peers, siblings. Someone else tell me where and from whom did you learn about relationships and how they work? We learn from others in our journey, whether it's a positive, whether it's a negative, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Where do we learn those things, and how are they developed? Anyone?
Brother Lanham, I think it starts out at the home with your parents and your siblings as we seek to find and introduce ourselves to other people. We can see how they relate to their constituency in the community and church and their family units, the aunts and uncles and what have you. And you tend to build a focus on what you would like to have in your life. But I think it comes from the home initially. And that's the reaction from parents and siblings, whether good or bad.
Whether good or bad. So you say that you learn how to treat people in your life by how the people you watch how they treat each other.
Exactly. And then you determine in your own mind what you would like to see as you get, more mature and get a deeper understanding of what you should be like in your own life and what you want.
Or what you don't want.
Yeah.
All right. So when we look at how we learn about relationships, we learn from, I think, our total environment. Everybody that we come in contact with. You learn on your job how you want people to be treated because you have a supervisor who's a very negative and yell and scream. You say, well, if I'm ever a supervisor, I don't want to be that way, or I'll change jobs because I don't want to. You're not going to talk to me any kind of way, or you're going to deal with me any kind of way. But then some people take it because we have to have the job. So all those interactions you have throughout your life controls that. Our interactions in schools. Um, if you have a very good teacher, a very positive teacher, a teacher that pushes you to be your best, you would take more chances and risk in the classroom. And if you have a teacher that beats you down, a child could be very bright, but they won't say anything because they're not sure how the person's going to treat them on the other end of it. So we have a lot of our young people who don't excel in school, not because they're not bright, but because they're afraid to be themselves or to talk in the classroom. Anyone else, please. The more we interact, I think the smoother this goes and the better interaction that we have as a group. So when we talk about it, the peers, parents, the streets, uncles, aunts, our community, all that goes into shaping how we view and how we learn about relationships, even though we maybe just look on the outside of it, we don't know the deeper parts of it, but it gives us a framework on how we want to treat people and how we want to be treated. And that framework sets up a lot of things that we do in our lives. So we move through the framework of everything. I'm gonna move on to the next slide.
Hold on,
And
brother Lanham. Hold
all
on.
right.
I got two things real quick. Um, the brother right before you interjected that church is also a place where we see these relationships built, and you just gave the example of school of a child that's beat down and robbed of their dignity. Where they could be very smart, but they're gonna withdraw or not participate. And a job where your supervisor,
Yeah. And I think that
beats
happens
you
the same thing in
down
the
and
church.
belittles.
If a person comes to
That's
church and they don't feel like they belong or they don't have a voice in what's going on, it negatively affects their coming to church. Or if church is only a place they're talked at, not talked to or talked with, but they're talked about. Yes.
yes, that's the point I was making. And with us being here on this call, that's something we got to consider and make that adjustment, that positive adjustment as we are looking to disciple people, especially men. Um, we really need to create the environment where people can thrive, not that we're there to rob them of their dignity or like you said, belittle them. So that's one point I wanted to make. And you asked in this question where relationships made. And while we may not look at it as uh, a place where it can be done or should be done, or we may not look at it as a place where it's effectively done, we have to understand that there's generations of people now who are building their relationships through social media. It may not be the best, but we do need to recognize that social media is a place where a lot of young people and even some older people now are finding ways to build relationships through social media and internet connection.
Yeah, I totally agree that we have to think about everything that we're using that's part of the community. And social media is becoming more and more part of our community. The only interaction some people have in their day is what they do on Facebook, Instagram, or some other these posts. They spend their whole lives and they believe everything that comes across the internet because that's what's constantly in their face. Kids spend their day like this now. I told them they're gonna have giant humps on their neck and big old thumbs as we adapt to what we do. And that's what they do all day long. Their heads are down and their thumbs are moving. And we have to understand to reach them where they are and to have a relationship, we have to have some kind of connectivity through the mediums that they use. How relationships develop and nurture. One of these I'm gonna spend more time on than the other because I have a couple of questions and I wrote a couple of notes about it. But one is common ground and interest. That's usually how we first connect with people. Is because we have something we have in common. We have a common interest, and then we start doing that together. And as we do that together, we start to develop a relationship, a friendship, and that friendship deepens. And then we find more and more things we have in common. A lot of people think there's a lot of difference between most people. No, mostly there's a lot of similarities between most people. Some people that do things differently in the way you do it, but you still have a common interest. Listening and giving honest feedback when warranted. We are too busy sometimes telling people what they want to hear instead of what people need to hear. Honest feedback gives us a chance to grow. Listening, not criticizing, but sometimes just listening. Remember I said earlier, prayer works because God sometimes doesn't say anything. He just listens to what we have to say and gives us the ability to work it out for ourselves. Mutual respect. We talked about that earlier. The next bullet point is the one I'm going to spend a little time on. Allowing people to see the real you and not just your representative. Now, I know you're wondering, who's my representative? Representative, the first person that you give somebody when they first meet you. I want y'all to think about when you first started dating your significant other. Tell me how long you was in that relationship before you came to came into the conversation. How long was your representative there before you showed up? I want you to think about it. Reverend Griffin, how long did you date your wife before Earl Griffin showed up and not the representative Earl Griffin? Brother Harris, how long were you there talking to your wife before Guy came to the thing? Was it the first date, the second date, the 20th date? Were you married for a year? When did you actually show up?
My wife is on the call, so I'm gonna have to tell her about the second day that I knew her, you know. And y'all got to figure that out. But my wife on the call, so I'm gonna have to answer that way.
Great answer.
Love
Great
it,
answer.
love it, love it.
Well, my wife is listening too, and we've been married 41 years, and I can tell you now, all of me ain't showed up yet.
Hey, I'm trying to get to that 41 years though, so the answer a little different.
But think
But
about
I
it.
agree with you. I agree with you. That is something that is probably never and it's not just that the real you hasn't showed up, but we always are evolving. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And
Right.
surely you're not the same person that your wife met 41 years ago.
Yeah, I'm
You
about the
know, so.
same. But
Well,
what I'm saying is that we have a representative of us that go before us everywhere we go. And that's the best foot we put forward. But we have some things about us that we hide from ourselves,
Brother
that we
Lanham,
hide from other people. So when I mean your representative, the only person or entity or spirit that ever sees all of us is God. Because we can't hide what's in our heart from God, but we can hide stuff from other people.
Brother Lanham, you have someone who's trying to make a comment.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm this brother Griffin again. Now, I would say that we say we learn about relationships from childhood and siblings and such. So when you asked me that question about when was the first time I showed Marilyn me, I started thinking about when was the first time I allowed me to show me to me.
Ah,
So I didn't have to be a certain way for siblings and peers and that sort of thing. I could just stand up and represent who I was, authentically. And so that has been an ongoing process. Um, I will tell you now, I have a therapist, and she asks me when I see her, am I talking to Earl or am I talking to Jerry? I need to know which one I'm talking to. And that's one of the things, because depending on the situation and the context, we do show up as different. And but now my wife would probably answer the question immediately. She got to see, this old first sergeant right away. But we are evolving, as Brother Guy said, and as you said, we're being transformed. But a lot of times people don't want to see you. They want to see the representative. They'd rather deal with the representative. If you put too much of yourself in front of them, then you find out they can't handle who you are, and then you go back to that representative again, or go back in the shadows, something like that. So it's a tough question. I don't want to gloss over it, but I don't want to dwell on it either. But it's certainly worth reflecting on, always being present, being conscious of who shoes you got on today. Who are you representing as yourself, or this picture that people have of you? That's real deep. So I appreciate the question, and I'm taking notes now myself. I appreciate that question.
because when we look at our representative hides everything that bad that's happened to us, mostly when they present themselves to people. I always like to use a thing that every one of us takes a little one of us with us. Every time Joseph Lanham goes somewhere, I take Joseph Lanham the man, but I take Joseph Lanham the little boy that was talked about, that was bullied, or whatever happened to him. He goes along with me. And sometimes how I react to situation is not based upon the man, it's based upon the hurt little boy. And people have to realize that you take that hurt with you everywhere you go. And when I mean, when you start showing people the real you, it's when you show all aspects of you, not just the adult that's in front of them, but the hurt child that's with them too. And it takes a long time. The person has to have a lot of faith and a lot of things about themselves to allow them not just to be their representative. I know that someone else has something to say about the representative, so go right ahead, please.
I was going to add that the CPE that pastors and I think we've had some lay people, I'm not sure, go through in the CME church. It teaches how to mitigate those wounds and how to present yourself in the most healed fashion that you can when you're interacting with relationships. And a lot of men shy away from it because it strips you so that you can get to the authentic self and then you can operate from that self. So I just want to say that there are programs that are specifically targeted to help us to be better wounded healers, as I can't think of his name right now, but Henry Nouwen. That's what Henry Nouwen. Yeah, his book says about the wounded healer. So, like you say, we carry these things, but because we are mentors and because we're fathers and husbands, sometimes we need that type of experience. And I'm talking about the CPE now, clinical pastoral education. Sometimes we need those types of experiences to teach us how to make sure that we are looking at what we're going through and what we're about to do from an honest perspective, as opposed to letting the representative formalize our responses. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think everyone got a good grasp of what you're saying.
all
But
right.
Yeah.
as we go ahead, please. I know that some other people have something to say about your representative, and when you allow people to actually start seeing you. And sometimes do you want to hide you because you are not comfortable with you yet. As Brother Griffin says, sometimes we're not comfortable enough with ourselves to allow people to see us.
Good morning. This is Brother Liverman. I just want to say thank you for this safe space to speak. I still struggle. I believe someone said earlier that you aren't always the same person that you once were. As we're continuously evolving, and you find yourself in a space. Who am I now? Who am I now? When you add just a little bit to a situation, the situation changes. So you're still discovering. It takes me to a place when I was a child, and I'm a school teacher as well, and I speak to a lot of young people, and they all share the same sentiment that I did. One of the worst things you can tell a young person is be yourself. And the question is, well, who am I right now? Because I am always evolving. And as you're evolving and you're coming into your new self or the new space, the new place you are in your life, you're discovering. So the fact that you are discovering, leaves room for you to feel uneasy about your representative. So I too have found myself struggling in that area as a going on 45-year-old man, because I'm continuously evolving. So I'm asking, who am I right now in this moment? So thank you. I just want to put that out there about far as my representative goes. And you are absolutely correct. We are who we are for whenever the situation we're in. If you pour water into a cup, it becomes a cup. If you pour water into a bowl, it becomes the bowl. So you have to be able to be fluid to be able to change it to any situation you are. But however, you have to always remain mindful of how you're seen and how you're perceived. One of the greatest lies anyone can say, well, it doesn't matter what people think of you. Yes, actually, it does. And it depends on what context. So thank you, brother. I just wanted to share that.
While y'all were talking, I wrote a note and I had a question that I wanted to ask. Is it more difficult for a Black man to seek assistance and help because we're not supposed to show that side of us that we needed?
Absolutely, I agree. I work with 90% female at my job, and the majority of females that I work with, they all have this delusional view of what a man is. A man should never ask for help. If a man asks for help, that means he's weak, and therefore he's not a man. You know, and so that's what I deal with myself. So I'll raise my hand first.
That's overall as a man. We have that difficulty um, trying to be everything everyone expects us to be, that we cannot seek help when we need it. You know, whether it's our mental health, our social health, our family health, our financial health. We think that we should be able to handle everything without someone giving us a helping hand. When I think about somebody giving you a helping hand, it's sort of like when Jesus walked out on the raging waters, and he was walking, and person got off the ship and walked towards him. That person started to sink, and Jesus offered his hand. But the offer had to be accepted. If that man didn't accept the offer, he would have drowned, but he accepted the offer. Sometimes we as men are being offered help, but we're too proud to accept the help. Kind of talk to me, because that's part of the relationships. How can we accept help and still be a strong person in our relationship? Yeah, I'm always writing notes, and I have things that go in my head I have to bring out to y'all.
Brother Lanham, if I may offer a word to the group,
Yes, ma'am.
Vulnerability, this notion of being vulnerable, right? Because even in being able to ask or receive help, it's an admission of vulnerability. It's you have to let someone in your space. So how does for me, one of the things as a parent, looking back on things that I could have done better with my sons, particularly, is allow these to be totally vulnerable so that they can engage in this process of answering the question, who am I now, and how do I allow, how do I show or engage who I am? What's the how? And I find in my relationships, both professional and in my professional career, I was in a field dominated by men, often the only Black and female present. And my biggest struggle was getting my colleagues to admit when they were wrong or when they did not know. It was like the hardest thing for them to say, I don't know. And so I'm just curious, did that come from home? Maybe, but I think also in our mega culture, we put that kind of pressure on men. So it's just interesting to know how men on a call deal with the notion of being vulnerable. Is it something that you're comfortable with, not comfortable with, and why or why not?
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because one of the points in this slide is don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And knowing your picadillos, the thing that sets you off, the things that hurt you, the things you don't like, and being able to express it is one of the things that make you vulnerable. You have to understand, I guess, yourself. And it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to put yourself out there for people to take pot shots at, because people with their tongues and what they say can actually destroy folks. We see it I retired this year, but you see it in schools all the time. The opinion of the peers can destroy a child just quickly. what they post about them, what they say about them, what groups they're allowed to be in. And it's so hard to be vulnerable for a man because if you put yourself out there, you'll be perceived as less than. And as a black man, you're already coming in being perceived as less than or not as smart. So to be vulnerable and to deal with those perceptions of you is kind of difficult. Gentlemen, ladies, everybody on the call, please chime in because it's how do we deal with being vulnerable in this society? And how do we deal with being vulnerable in the space of our relationships and our church family? How do we deal with being vulnerable?
Brother Lanham, I think a lot of times we we find ourselves expressing anger in order not to be vulnerable when what we're really feeling is hurt. As a prison chaplain working at a male facility, that was a really big challenge, that men would experience disappointment or hurt, but it would show up as anger in order to give a perception of not being vulnerable. And it wasn't always trying to convince the people on the outside. They were trying to convince themselves that they weren't vulnerable, right? So as a means of protection. And so how does the protector, because that's one of the characteristics that is assigned to masculinity, right? The protector. How does the protector then struggle with identity if the protector doesn't master protecting itself or himself?
When we think about what you just said, protecting ourselves usually stem from something that happened to us that won't allow us to let people see us. There's been some kind of trauma. There's been some kind of thing that injured us spiritually, emotionally, sometimes physically. And to keep that trauma from happening again or that trauma repeating itself, we will do things to protect ourselves and we put up that wall or that shield, everything to keep everybody out. And that leads to us not to develop the relationships and the relationships that we should have because we're trying to protect what we did have, trying to keep it from not happening to us again, no matter what it was. We always looking for ways to keep ourselves safe emotionally. And that means a lot when we're talking about our emotional safety. Everyone doesn't have that place or the people or the wherewithal to get the help they need. So we end up protecting ourselves and building walls, and so that we're not vulnerable. But then, as you said, it manifests itself in some kind of way. The kids in school, if I can't read, I'd rather be a class clown and act a fool and get in trouble than for people to find out I can't read. But that's my area of vulnerability. How people are going to perceive me, what they're going to say about me.
So,
Reality is
Brother
not,
Lanham,
yes,
for
ma'am.
Black men in particular, then, it seems that exploring communal trauma or things passed down to us that maybe wasn't our direct traumatic experience, but the experience of our parents, grandparents, or even great-grandparents that has been handed down. How often are we then responding to that in our relationships? And does that identifying that help us to mature? So like what Dr. Griffin said, we learn in CPE, I can separate their stuff from my stuff and empower myself to respond to the moment rather than to relive an experience that maybe I didn't actually live myself, right? We see it in church. I see it as a presiding elder. When you go to a church and people are angry, and when you ask them, what are they angry about? What happened? They can't even tell you because it wasn't their experience. It was the experience of their grandparents that has been passed down to them and now interferes with their relationship with God, with the church, with the community, right? And so part of that process of maturing is the willingness to visit those spaces and to answer those questions. Why? You
When you
know,
talk,
you have to be willing to be vulnerable enough to say that and be honest about how you're affected by things that happen.
but also when you said that, you got to be willing, but you also got to be brave enough. That's a scary thing that you're talking about for someone to explore in their lives. That you can heal and fix where you are, so you can have a better relationship with everyone else. The collective trauma you're talking about, the collective injuries that we have suffered as a people, as a church family, as a race, all that goes into building who we are. And we have to work our way through that and be vulnerable enough to grow from it. This is great. Anyone else,
You
please?
got Brother Roberts got his hand up.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Brother Robert. Unmute yourself.
He's unmuted. We just can't hear him. Brother Wendell.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, we couldn't hear him.
All right. While Brother Robert's right now, anyone else has something they would like to, any point they would like to bring up right now?
I
We
would
need to
just
almost,
like to go ahead.
I think we keep in the back of our minds that we as Black men are vulnerable in this society from birth to death. And so we carry that sense of vulnerability into every aspect of our lives because, we were not able to be men, uh, especially in our own homes and in our families. And we had to carve out a way to be a man without having the same, how do you say it, the same privileges or the same respect as other men, we would say. And we were made vulnerable as opposed to willingly being vulnerable and put in positions in front of our families where they had to decide how much manhood was allowed. So there's a lot that Black men carry. We just carry it, and I think we tend to, we are angry, maybe even enraged at certain times of the year, with generational trauma and with family memories and all of this. especially as a child. Anybody older than I am certainly wouldn't have some of these experiences, and I'm 69. So, we got a lot to deal with. So when you say don't be afraid to be vulnerable, we have that being vulnerable with our relationships with other people as a human being, and then trying to stand up for ourselves and not be vulnerable against the oppressor. That's all that stuff comes with being a Black man. So we navigate, and this conversation is helping because you have here listening and giving honest feedback when warranted. That when warranted is very key in that statement you got on this slide, because sometimes it's just better to show vulnerability by moving in silence and just redirecting your course when you see you might be in the wrong, making the adjustment, as opposed to having a long conversation. Just realizing, recognizing as a man that I'm wrong in this situation, critically reflect on it, think of how we can reposition ourselves. So this conversation with these PowerPoint nuggets you have here, it really, really helps us to dig deep enough to where we realize who we're dealing with when we're dealing with the enemy, and I'm talking about Satan, and when we're dealing with the oppressor, and I'm talking about racism and all that, and then when we're dealing with our significant others and our children and our families. I think maybe we need to think about how we present ourselves in all those contexts and make sure if we're angry and if we are not going to be vulnerable, we're doing that to the right audience. I guess that's what I'm saying. That's all I wanted to lift up because I'm still processing this conversation.
Mhm. Anyone else? I see there's someone that wants to go ahead. Anyone else that has something to add to this conversation? I'm enjoying it. See, I keep writing notes for myself. So when we get back to it, everything that we talked about is all wrapped up in our representative. It's our true self and our representative. Our representative that we have to send out to the work world, the representative we send to our family, the representative we send to our community, the representative we take to church. We have to have a representative for almost everything. And when people see the real you, everything that's inside of you, and not just your representative, then they understand for where you are, where you're coming from, and what you would do and what you won't do. Like I said before, the only person who's never seen our representative is God. God's the only one who doesn't see our representative. God sees our true selves and everything that's happened to us, everything that we deal with, everything that we think about. Thought and actions and words don't escape God. It escapes people around us. Because someone told me one time there's three things nobody can control: what I think, what I say, and what I do. Those are three things I have total control of: what I think, what I say, and what I do. I might have consequences and repercussions from it, but I still control it. So my representative sometimes is sent out to protect me from me. Because all of us, when Dr. Harris talked about the anger, our representatives sometimes help us control our anger so that we're not putting it out there on society. It helps us control what we want to say. And as Black men, there's so many things that we want to say, that we want to do, that we have to retard or not let it grow, because what would happen, the repercussions for our family and everyone else that goes along with us. I told somebody one time, I spoke at Black History program of the school, every person that's ever existed from the beginning of time went into making of me. Everybody, if one person in my bloodline hadn't been strong enough to make it, I wouldn't exist. So people don't think about it that way. We're gonna go on. There's a couple more things here, but I love the discussion that we on and where we're headed. Affection and intimacy. How does that help us develop and nurture relationships? How does our expression of love or empathy or caring, how does that foster relationships? How does that emotional or physical or whatever intimacy we have with other people, how does that foster our relationship and nurture our relationships?
I'll say it has everything to do with fostering relationships. Uh, when you show love to an individual, they respond to it. And, you know, it's just the true way and the honest way of showing how you care about an individual. A person can tell when you truly love them just by your actions, because it is an action. It's not just something that you can just throw out there. It's got to be an action toward someone, and they can tell. Just like you brought up students there a while back, and I taught, and in the classroom, I know for myself, and coaching the same way. When kids saw that you really cared about them, they would do anything that you asked of them, and they also learn how to show that love, in return, by doing things for other individuals because they see how it's being done. The same thing within a household. Um, when kids see it, they respond to it. They will, show that same type of affection and love for an individual as you have shown and as they have been taught and seen. Thank you.
I got a quick point. I got a
Go
quick
ahead.
point, Brother Lanham. I want to make sure that we this is just a reminder. Remember, we're here to develop discipleship methods for bringing men into a relationship with God, and all the experiences that we are sharing are real life experiences, and many of you educators have shared how you have learned to facilitate building better relationships with your students and your colleagues and stuff. Now, I just want us to put in the back of our mind or at the front of our mind to think, how do we now use these experiences and these competencies that we have on our jobs and other things to transition how we are dealing with ministering to men? Because all of these challenges, all of this hidden anger, this hidden person, this real representative, we're struggling with that, with building effective relationships with men, that we're struggling with building relationships with men so that we can introduce them to God, to have that authentic relationship with God. And that representative that you keep mentioning, Brother Lanham, oftentimes the representative that we're showing as Christians, as men, as Black men in the church, is all we're showing. We're not authentic with them. We're not um 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 really processing the fact that we've been there where you are at before, the struggles they're having. So I just want to make sure that we're also processing great conversation, but also processing how do we bring this into our church? How do we bring these solutions? I guess to wrap it up, how are we going to bring these solutions into our church to deal with these multiple layers of relationship challenges that we're having? Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Guy. And yes, that's the ultimate goal of this discussion is how do we build these relationships? Because that's what it's all about. Is to how do we build the relationships within our church, then we outreach it outside of the church, that we bring people into the church. So that brings us to probably our next slide, the healthy versus the unhealthy relationship. The foundation of healthy relationship is love. And the four cornerstones of that relationship is loyalty, kindness, respect, and forgiveness. The foundation on unhealthy relationship is selfishness, with the cornerstones being deceit, deception, dishonesty, and fault pointing. So when we look at it, how many relationships, as Pastor Harris brought it before, in the church are based on those traumatic experiences where someone dealt with faults being pointed out, deceit, and they're harboring those feelings, which affects their relationship with the church and their relationship, as my wife just pointed out behind me, with God also. How many of those things are being in those unhealthy relationships? And how can we get to the healthy relationship where the foundationally is based on love, with loyalty, kindness, respect, and forgiveness? And I think one of the biggest ones in that whole thing is forgiveness. How do we forgive other people? And how do we forgive ourselves? Because a lot of times we don't forgive ourselves. We hold anger so long that we forget about it, Reverend Harris pointed out, that we can't forgive ourselves and let things go. So we can let them go so that we can be a better person and build a better church. Anyone want to comment on those foundational pieces and the cornerstones of those foundational pieces?
On our very first meeting, Reverend LaSure, our very first meeting over 2 years ago, Reverend LaSure said that he goes to all these conferences, all these meetings, and he sees all these people, but he didn't know them. And that has always sort of resonated with me. And when I look at even this call, Brother Lanham, you and Brother Larry are down in Magnolia, outside of Brunswick. And that's the closest church to us. And for years, I knew nobody in that church. I mean, for years, until we came into relationship. Here's the closest church to us, and I knew nobody in that church. But because of processes like what we've done now, we are on the call now with Brother Williamson and Brother Richard up in Williams up in another whole nother district. We're communicating with them. So we have access to a lot of solutions to share that. Now when we go places, we not only see people, we know them. Yes, it's been through technology a lot of times, but we have the ability to build those relationships. And so I think that's one of the solutions is understanding the need and the desire and having the desire to build effective relationships in our church.
And I'll say this: in order to build a good relationship within the church, you have to have that stick to itness to do it, staying with it, because you'll get a lot of negativism from individuals, and if you let that negativism, kind of seek into you, then you won't accomplish your goals, what you're trying to accomplish. I was trying to think about what Brother Harris was saying from the beginning, and how how can we tie men into a good healthy relationship or unhealthy relationship. I'm thinking back on some of the meetings that we held of our men's ministry within our church, and a lot of times it became kind of argumentative. And that kind of had us to the point where some of the guys who had young boys in their families did not want to bring their boys to the meetings, because they said they didn't want the boys to to see us in there arguing about this, that, and the other. So keeping it healthy within each other is very important. And knowing your goals, having the means and know-how of how to stick to whatever that goal is is very important because it can become, unhealthy, like it did, with us for, I won't say it stayed with us, but it did have an effect on our meetings, the numbers that attended the next time, because it became a little bit unhealthy. And, guys didn't want, like the younger men who we really needed within the church, the younger guys, to come back. And it took a while, but we were able to work it, and we still, still doing things that are, healthy. Let me put it that way. Thank
Well,
you.
I think sometimes when we get into these arguments, we're disagreeing. Some people disagree just because they want to disagree with everything. That
That's
we
right.
have to understand that. But also, people disagree because they feel they're going to lose power. They
Mhm.
can't share because they figure if I allow someone else to do something, then they're going to take away my power base. Remember, the foundation of an unhealthy relationship is selfishness. That selfishness that if I lose power, if I can't control things, if I can't have people do what I wanted them to do, now I've lost my base.
So
Not
true.
realizing the more I share, the more I open up, the more I get. And that's the part that we have to get people to understand that as long as we're giving and we're sharing and we're being respectful and we forgive ourselves and others, we'll draw more people to us than trying to be selfish and hold on to that little bit of power we think we have. Everyone knows that someone's been doing a program for 40 years, and as soon as someone want to help with the program, they want to shut the program down because they don't want to share the power of the program. They want everyone to know that they put that program on, that it's their program.
That's so true. And I think back too at some of the ministries when we have those positive ministries that helps grow healthy relationships. When we was going around the churches with Brother Richard Williams, who's on the call, led, we would go around to churches and kind of help those churches and things that they needed. That was a church that the flooring was just almost as you walk into the church, it was just about almost gone. And I just was surprised at the amount of work that was done. Put a steeple on that on a church also that was done by the guys, and it was just so positive, And then the church themselves reached out by bringing lunch, things of that nature. All of those healthy relationships, doing things, ministries, that can help build positive relationships. Those type of things really help in healthy relationships. Thank you.
Anyone else on
So,
healthy and unhealthy relationships? Go ahead.
real quick, what just to piggyback on what Brother Williamson just said, for us to have healthy relationships, we got to spend time together. We're gonna have to um, accomplish stuff together or work on something together. You know, the storm hit down here a few months ago, and man, people come out and you see that you have to go through different things together. That's why one of the if you ever been in the military, you got somebody that you ever went to war with. That's a lifelong relationship there. You know, your best friend in combat, and you've been through stuff together. When we look at that, even as the Bible, the blessing we have with Jesus is that he spent time on earth with us. Buddha and all these other gods that people want to, Zeus, all these other gods, Jesus walked with us and he continues to walk with us. He continues to be in there with us. And that's the model of leadership, holding our hand when we bump our butt, pick us up, all of those things. So I think that leads us back to our model of relationship builder with being Jesus.
Thank you. I'm moving on to the next slide. How
Can
do I
you hear me,
develop?
Brother Guy?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what Brother Guy and the others said, about the young men. A lot of times we feel self in confidence about ourselves. We don't want other people to tell us, how to raise a family or live a life. People that's done been through this and know. And a lot of men, they feel like, if I can't do it, nobody else could do it for me. So in the past, as I learned, growing up, it's people that can teach you and show you and guide you and make your life much better, because I experienced that with the people that, helped me in life. And as I grew older, it became clear to me that every young man, a lot of our families, they don't have the father there, or some of them don't have the mother there. But yet still they are struggling to find someone to help them. And they feel like, nobody wants to help me, nobody care about me. And they grew up taking the anger out, just be angry all the time. And that changed a person's life a lot. And so we have to continue, program like this to bring people in and get them to understand, because as today, I turned 78 yesterday, but it's things that I still need to learn and how to treat people, my wife and my family, although they're grown. But as we communicate and get together, we still got to love each other and show respect for each other. And that's not in a lot of homes today.
Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. That for you all, his number only showed up, but that's brother Carlton Hobbs there from over in Jacksonville. 78, brother. Well, happy
McCray.
birthday, man. You McCray. You
Thank you.
definitely don't look 78, so God has blessed you. With that, a few months ago, brother Harold Mason was sharing with us, and one of the challenges he presented to us, and I want you to hear me out here. A challenge that he presented to us was the fact that we have a lot of females trying to raise young men.
Right.
And that now he presented the challenge. And that it was a challenge that they wouldn't let you talk to their boys, their young men, they wouldn't bring you around. And I think that this lesson that you're doing today, Brother Lanham, has really helped me to understand where some of that comes from. They've had traumatic relationships with men. In some cases, maybe why they don't want their child to be in relationship with other men, because they feel that maybe other men will mentor that child into those negative relationships that they've had. So they my uncles and them used to call it, they tie them to the string, and they baby them and they protect them, and they're protecting them from actually what they really need. So for a solution to that, now that we understand that, we have to be a really better man. As Christians, we're supposed to be God's man. We're supposed to be that example that somebody would want us to mentor their children and build relationships with them. Like Brother Williamson was just saying, I don't want my child or my grandchild in a toxic environment if that's what we're presenting in the church. And too many times that's what we have allowed to happen. That's not what's supposed to happen. Not saying that there's not supposed to be a disagreement about something, but there's a way that we process disagreements as Christians, as that higher being. So I thank you. And once again, happy birthday to Brother Carlton.
Thank you.
Yes, I had the privilege of going up to Jacksonville, Georgia with Brother Guy and doing a presentation up there, and really enjoyed the time that we spent up there. So the next slide is, how do I develop a relationship with God? Psalm 19, verses 33 and 34. Teach me, O Lord, the way of thy statutes, and I shall keep it until the end. Give me understanding, and I shall keep thy law. Yes, I have observed it I shall observe it with my whole heart. Part of what developing a relationship with God is obeying his commandments. The more we learn about God's desire for us, the more we understand his heart. And I think that's difficult. The commandments and edicts, it's only 10, but it's kind of hard sometimes to keep those 10 because if we obey what God has set for us, then we can start developing that relationship. Because then we'll start doing what Reverend Harris said in the beginning. We'll start asking for help, and we'll start understanding what is desired of us, and we will do what we're supposed to be doing. It won't lessen the trauma. It won't take away the trauma. It won't take away the racism and everything else we have to deal with at men, but it'll give us a foundation and guardrails. When you have a solid road to travel with guardrails, we can't go but so low and we can't go but so wide. Something's going to keep us in that path or on that road or help us with our journey. So that's part of the developing a relationship with God. Can anyone else help us with how we develop our relationship with God?
Brother Lanham, you brought up the Ten Commandments, and something that was shared with me. We learned the Ten Commandments in Sunday school as children, and we used to say the Decalogue in church. But out of the Ten Commandments, two of the commandments make reference to how we should build a relationship with God. The other 8 commandments about how we should build relationships with each other. So a big part of our building a relationship with God is how we treat each other. Now I'm not saying that's the totality of the thing, but we can't talk to God and tell God we love him and do all this, and we treating his children any kind of way. So a part of that is still about how we build relationships with each other, which will, reflect on how we are honoring God.
So you're saying, how can I build a relationship with a God? How can I love a God I can't see, and I don't love the people I see every day?
Can't do it.
Yeah.
I would say developing a relationship with God, it takes study. It takes some reading. It takes some Bible studies. It's a development like in what you have here is you have to develop it. It's nothing that just comes over you, unless you're a different individual. But I just know for myself, I probably stayed less than when I was growing up, 30 meters from the church that I attended, and my mother was strong in the church, so I don't have to tell you all what my life was all about. Uh, you was going to be there. It wasn't no question as to what you was going to be doing, and you was going to be there. Every Sunday, Bible study, Sunday school, and those type of things, and developing those relationships. We had a good group of young people that went to Sunday school, and then less than I probably would say less than a half a mile, there was a um, pharmacy up the street that opened up kind of early. And after we finished Sunday school, a lot of us would go up there and get some ice cream and those type of things. All of those things help develop and I know help build my life as a relationship with God. Now, don't get me wrong. I still have a lot of things I have to work on, even to this day. Um, but I do know that developing that relationship is the life that you want to live, the life that he sent his son here for us to guide us on how we should live. So it takes a lot to build that relationship, but it's very worthwhile and very needed, and especially nowadays, very needed within, especially our young men, our black males, and so forth, developing a relationship with God. So we try to do things within the church also to get them to come and participate in some of the activities that we're doing. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna go to the conclusion. I know we try to keep these to an hour, and we've been at this about an hour and 20 minutes, hour 15. So the conclusion, remember we had an overarching theme. And what we come to today, and what I got from it was that relationships are not easy. They take work. Your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with everyone else takes work. We learned that relationships are a partnership, that is us working together. It requires two-way communication. It encourages personal growth, and it supports other people's goals and aspirations. That none of us are, if you want to have a healthy relationship with someone, you're not trying to knock them down or tear them down or tell them their dreams are not worthwhile, that you're encouraging, that you're supportive, that you have a respect for values and opinions. Remember we talked about the arguments in the church and trying to hold on to power. If you respect someone else's values and you respect their opinions, then you will talk to them and try to move together as we do things. And last but not least, you got to know your own priorities. You got to know what's important to you. You got to know that having a relationship with God, a relationship with your church, relationship with your community is important to you. We do what we prioritize. We do what's important. If you want to find out what's important to a person, find out what they spend the money on. Where we put our money is where's our priority. If we put all our money and time and energy into gambling and lottery, then that's what's important to us. If we put it into traveling and cruises and having a good time, that's what's important to us. If we put our money and our energies into our family, then that's what's important to us. So we have to know our own priorities. We have to align ourselves with our priorities, and we have to move with our priorities. If a priority is building the church, then we will work in that way that we need to build our church and encourage men to come with us and do what we are doing. We will invite people to come because what we're inviting them to is something good, something that we feel is important. And when you feel that something is important and you show people something important, they will either come along with you or they will stay away from you. But at least they'll know what you prioritize in your life. That's it for me. I'm gonna turn it back over to Brother Guy. Thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for your interaction. Thank y'all for your comments. Everything you did today helped me grow because I look at these presentations and when I go to the men-to-men thing, it's things that help in me. Because a lot of things I bring up are things I struggle with and things I have questions about. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for pouring into my life. I really appreciate it. And Brother Harris, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Unless someone has some comments, I'm sorry. Anyone has some comments, statements, or anything that they want to add to our discussion as we wrap it up for today?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank Brother Lanham for his guidance and teaching us. And I enjoyed him other week down in Jacksonville at Rock Hill. And leadership like this is what we need. And it's a blessing to hear so many young men get up on Saturday morning and listen at what we have to say. And I hope we can get more. And my thing is, I never stop asking people to come, join us or come to church or get out and do something different with their life. Because we have so many young men and women at home sitting there, playing games, doing stuff that they will never, get anything out of it. Just like I said, if you don't put something in, you're not going to get nothing worthwhile out of it if it's not for the good. And so teaching like this and people like y'all and Brother Guy and all the others, and even his wife, she takes time to get up and help him do the program and help him get things started. It takes a team. It takes a family to pull together to make life worth living. And I enjoy every chance I get to join in. And by the way, last week, I joined in, I think Brother Guy was on that, the crew from Texas. I got a chance to link up with them, and I enjoyed their outcome. So thank y'all a lot. And go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm through. Go ahead.
Okay. I just got a text from someone who is driving and they couldn't talk on the call, but it's Brother Gregory Demmer. He wanted to know, he said that one way he's thinking about reaching younger men. As a start, I think that every man on this call should make a point to have one young man in the next call with them. That he's going to go out and try to find one young man to sit down with him and be a part of what we're discussing and what happens at men's ministry.
Yeah,
And
it's a good idea.
yes, he just had one younger man, just invite him and have to go with them or go meet them or whatever. Have that person beside them as they go through a call. So I'm sorry he sent that, and I didn't want to forget that he sent that text so that I could read it to everyone. Anyone else that has any closing remarks before I turn it over to Brother Harris? Brother Guy, I'm gonna turn it over to you now.